Strange, but true stories. Tales from the light side, the dark side, and the other side. I'm Steve White. Strange creatures have been featured on lots and lots of programs, including ours, for a long, long time. Cryptids, or animals with questionable origin or lack of hard scientific evidence to support their existence, have been debated for many years. And yet, sightings of these strange creatures still appear all over the globe. Large sea creatures that beached themselves just last year, in fact, one in Indonesia, and one pulled onto a Texas beach by Hurricane Harvey, later identified as a demon fish, have shown that lots of strange-looking creatures lurk in the depths. And take the rediscovery of the coelacanth in 1938. Long thought extinct since the Cretaceous period, more than 140 million years ago, a confirmed coelacanth was caught off the coast of South Africa in December 1938. Other coelacanth fish were captured over the next several decades, proving this prehistoric dinosaur of a fish found a way to survive into the 20th century. So does that mean other dinosaur-like creatures survive? And yes, crocodiles and alligators, and some birds and fish can all trace roots back to dinosaur ancestry. But what we are talking about today are about the creatures long thought extinct that may still be lurking. These stories were collected from Cryptozoology News. The Lake Norman Monster. For more than 40 years, the people living and recreating on Lake Norman in Mooresville, North Carolina, have claimed to have seen a strange creature living in the depths of their waters. Lake Norman has been a popular place for boaters, swimmers, and sun worshippers for many years. But some of those enjoying themselves on the water say they have seen an unknown creature appearing occasionally on the surface. Ted Hill told Cryptozoology News that he was on the lake one afternoon in search of a beach when he spotted a creature breach the surface, grab a duck, and carry it under. He claimed the sighting lasted about 2 minutes as the creature continued to breach. He described the creature as looking like the pictures of the famed Loch Ness Monster, only smaller, about 12 feet long, he said. A fisherman reported a similar sighting the following day, saying he was fishing from a boat and noticed a 10-foot dinosaur-like creature circle his boat and then dive back down. He also said it looked like the Loch Ness Monster. The people who live and enjoy the lake don't seem to be scared by a potential lake monster. Instead, they have embraced this creature over the years, creating a website dedicated to its sightings and giving him the nickname Normie. A report from the late 90s tells of a sighting by some high school kids diving into the lake from the Duke Power Trestle near the dam. We had been there for about 2 hours and making a lot of noise. I went to dive in and decided to make a huge splash. When I arose to the surface, everyone was like, "Get out of the water!" yelling and screaming that something was after me. I shrugged it off, and then after realizing that the water 20 feet behind me was rippling, I decided to swim like crazy. I reached the surface and climbed up the rocks to see a giant shadow under the water. It was at least 14 feet long. It surfaced a little more before finally going down. It looked like an alligator gar, but I couldn't imagine a fish getting that big. It looked like two people holding on to each other swimming. So who knows what it was? Needless to say, I haven't been back to jump from the trestle anymore. In 2007, a father and son from Illinois were enjoying the lake when they had their own sighting. I was tubing, being dragged behind my dad's boat. I had just fallen off from a quick turn, and I was floating in the water waiting for the boat to come back and pick me up. As I was waiting, I saw the neck of a large creature emerge from the water and rise up about 5 feet. I was terrified because it was only about 40 yards from me, and I don't know if this thing is mean or not. I quickly turned and started swimming towards the boat as my dad sped towards me because he saw it too. When I got on the boat, he said it disappeared right after I turned around. We've had a pretty good story to tell ever since. Lake Norman is the largest man-made lake in North Carolina, with 520 miles of shoreline and 50 miles of surface area. Its deepest point is 130 feet, and there's lots underneath the water to provide protection for a lake creature. There's an old textile mill, a town, and a grand estate that was called Elmwood when it was above water. Those little ghost towns and abodes could be the hangout for the creature everybody calls Normie. But what could this creature be? Some have speculated, like one of the accounts above, that it's an overgrown alligator gar. The alligator gar is a slender fish with a pointy snout and is pretty scary looking. But the largest one that has ever been recorded was only 8.5 feet long. So either there's a world record gar in the waters of Lake Norman, or it's something else. Others have speculated that what people are seeing is an actual alligator. Alligators are certainly not native to the area, but several have been spotted at nearby Lake Wylie since the mid-2000s. But most people can recognize an alligator, even under duress. Still, others speculate that it's just a big old catfish. It is suspected that left to thrive, a catfish can live for 30 to 35 years. And while these old boys may get big around the middle, they don't tend to get much longer than 5 feet long at the most. So what are people seeing at North Carolina's Lake Norman? A really big but known fish species? An alligator? Or could it be something strange and undiscovered? Our own Nessie, lurking in the deep waters of this popular Tar Heel State tourist destination. People have been telling these stories since soon after the lake filled up with water, until somebody pulls up Normie and says, "Here he is!" The world may never know. Could it have been a pterodactyl? They were the largest creatures to ever attain flight. With wingspans reaching nearly 40 feet, pterosaurs ruled the prehistoric skies for over 100 million years, until they died out with the dinosaurs about 65 million years ago. Or did they? There have been many modern-day sightings of creatures that, by eyewitness description, sound like pterosaurs. There are also intriguing rock carvings and even photographs that suggest that this species of amazing flying monsters could have survived extinction, could have soared through the skies in small numbers in remote parts of the world. Africa's Kongomodo. While other reports of pterosaur-like creatures have come out of Arizona, Mexico, and Crete, it is out of Central Africa that some of the most interesting anecdotes have come. While traveling through Zambia in 1923, Frank Melland collected reports from natives of an aggressive flying reptile they called Kongomodo, which means overwhelmer of boats. The natives, who were occasionally tormented by these creatures, described them as being featherless with smooth skin, having a beak full of teeth and a wingspan of between 4 and 7 feet. When shown illustrations of pterosaurs, Mellon reported the natives identified them as most resembling Kongomodo. In 1925, a native man was allegedly attacked by a creature that he identified as a pterosaur. This occurred near a swamp in Rhodesia, where the man suffered a large wound in his chest that he said was caused by the monster's long beak. In the late 1980s, noted cryptozoologist Roy Mackall led an expedition into Namibia from which he had heard reports of a prehistoric-looking creature with a wingspan of up to 30 feet. Pterodactyl in California? Bud Davis, a 54-year-old IT executive from California, told Cryptozoology News he and a relative were driving to Winnemucca when they came upon the unusual sight. "We noticed the creature in the median of the highway," he said about the encounter. "It was about 3 feet off the ground and about 20 feet from our car on the driver's side," he continued. Davis believes that the animal had just begun to take flight right before their vehicle approached at 11 p.m., as it was reportedly having problems getting off the ground. It was struggling to get enough lift to be able to fly over the car once it saw us. The creature's wings cleared the front windshield by only inches, so we both saw the thing very clearly as it flew across the front of our vehicle, left to right, and out of sight. The man describes the bird as being gray in color and had a long and thin neck. Its head, says Davis, was also thin and pointy with a long beak. He remembers it had a crest on the top of its head. The body was hump-like and appeared to be heavy. Thin, long legs. The wings were diamond-shaped and had claws at the end of each wing, a long, thin tail. From tip of beak to tip of tail, it was longer than the windshield was wide, so we'd estimate the overall length at 4 to 5 feet. The wingspan was wide. When in the open position, the left wingtip was positioned beyond the hood of our vehicle. The bottom half of the right wing was not visible. It was covered by the roof of the car, so we'd estimate the width tip to tip to be 6 to 7 feet, explained Davis. The IT executive thinks the bird looked like a pterosaur, a flying reptile believed to have lived during the Jurassic and went extinct by the end of the Cretaceous about 65 million years ago. Thunderbird, also known as rock, is the nomenclature used by Native Americans to refer to bird-like creatures with reptile features that are believed to be related to the extinct reptile. In 1890, the Arizona newspaper, the Tombstone Epitaph, reported that 2 ranchers had allegedly killed a winged monster, similar to an alligator, in the desert between the Whetstone and the Huachuca Mountains. The article about the pterosaur in particular made me curious. When I looked up some images for those, I realized that is what we had to have seen, said Davis. Davis says that he knows what he saw was real, but the sighting, which lasted about 15 seconds, didn't allow for any picture or video taking. Up until this evening, I had never heard of a pterosaur before, but the image I looked up is exactly what we saw. It was awesome and frightening at the same time, he said. Interstate 80 in Nevada cuts across the Lahontan Valley, a desert some people still refer to as the 40-mile desert. A minister claims she and her daughter saw an unidentified flying creature that looked like it was straight out of Jurassic Park. In 1994, the minister, a 50-year-old Texas resident and avid bird watcher, said they were at Stone Lakes National Wildlife Refuge, south of Sacramento, when the creature showed up on a clear spring day. We were hiking and looking for blue herons and other migratory birds, the woman told Cryptozoology News. My daughter and I saw the bird first, and we both pointed to it, stunned and in shock as we tried to come up with a logical explanation for what we thought we were seeing. It was not a kite, it was a real animal, she added about the alleged 1994 encounter. She says they observed the animal for about 20 minutes as it circled an area and then veered off in a different direction. She explains that even though it makes her nervous to have to admit it, the bird was very pterodactyl in shape. That is the point of reference I have for it. I remember I said, "That's impossible. They are an extinct species." My daughter, who was well read on extinct birds, kept pointing out the unusual features of this animal. She says her daughter described the creature as having a featherless, long, thin tail and a pterodactyl-like head. Its wings, she explained, were not shaped like a bird's wings. It had a long neck, long head, and long pointed beak area. It had a large wingspan, bigger than a blue heron. It was gliding very high up, with very little flapping movement of its wings. The minister admits to being a little freaked out at the time, and wondered whether the creature would attack them. I couldn't wait to get back to the car. When we got back, we couldn't stop talking about it. The 2 family members say that even though to this day they cannot positively identify the bird as a dinosaur, they know what it resembled. While talking to my daughter, we both Googled photos of pterodactyl sightings, and some of them are similar to what we saw, she confessed. Being birders, we were familiar with most birds. I didn't think I could call Audubon Society and tell them about the sighting because this bird was not on their checklist. They would have likely told me that I misidentified it because it was up in the air and it was probably a crane or heron. Believing that would certainly solve things, but my brain wouldn't rest. What we saw was neither a crane nor a heron. We saw a real living animal that was not familiar to us and looked like it was straight out of Jurassic Park. And the sighting, she explains, also carries social problems and the risk of ostracization. I did tell a couple of people. I told them factually, and they just stared at me saying, wow. I don't want to be exposed to the ridicule and have to defend my story, which I finally got brave enough to share. My daughter and I talk about it sometimes. Discussing it is like self-counseling. It gives us an opportunity to share that experience again and validate each other. At least we know what we saw, and discussing it is one way to try to keep the story alive, unravel the mystery in our heads, and find some kind of understanding and clarity as time passes. It does help to read online that others are seeing these animals too. This is what gave me the idea to come forward and share our sighting, said the minister. Raptor in the Georgia woods? A young man and his grandfather see a creature that looks like a living dinosaur. This happened to me and my grandpa on a hunting trip in July 2008. I don't see my grandpa very often, so I always take the chance to take trips with him. He's pretty much an outdoorsman and enjoys hunting, fishing, and just being out in nature. We were in the woods about 3 o'clock in the morning. We were on Grandpa's land in Georgia. It's a pretty place with the typical Georgia woodland and a few grassy plains. We were walking on a little rocky road heading for a site where Grandpa often sees deer. As normal, there were a lot of sounds going on at night in the woods. We ignored most of them and remained quiet to not scare away anything. Suddenly, we heard an unusual noise we had never heard before on our many hunting trips. Grandpa looked at me and listened. Then he raised his finger in front of his mouth to show me that we shouldn't make any more movements. I heard a lot of movement and more of that noise. I can't really describe the sounds, but I sure can describe what I saw, even when it was pretty dark. We just kept listening to the sounds as suddenly something came walking slowly out of the bushes and onto the road maybe 150 yards in front of us. My eyes got really big, and at that moment, I wasn't even scared, just amazed to see this creature. We didn't move. As crazy as it sounds, it looked just like a raptor from the popular Jurassic Park movies. I just froze because I thought things like that lived many millions of years ago. It had a long, stiff tail, walked on 2 feet, and had short arms. It looked lizard-like and had a huge claw on both of its feet and smaller claws on its arms. The creature appeared to us that it might be able to run fast, so we decided to just not move at all. It raised its head in the air, and it seemed like it was smelling the air. I estimated its height about 5 feet at the shoulders. After sniffing the air, it made those sounds again and turned around and ran off in the bushes. Grandpa and I waited until we felt safe again and then quietly made our way back to the truck and drove home. In the truck, we talked to each other about what we had just seen and decided to not tell it to Grandma because she would think we were crazy. I've never believed in stuff like ghosts and creatures and paranormal stuff, and I still don't believe in ghosts, but since that encounter, I believe in creatures that science doesn't know about. That's my story. As odd as it sounds, I know what I saw. This has been another strange but true stories. Have you ever had a run-in with a creature that you can't quite explain? We would love to hear about it. Send us an email to strangebutTrueStories2@gmail.com. I'm Steve White. Thanks for watching. Until next time.